Hi, I'm First Alert Chief Meteorologist Stephen Bowers. I've had several emails here lately asking me about the monsoon. When does it start? When does it normally start? And can I describe the setup of a monsoon? So we're going to talk about that. I did hit on this on some of our newscasts on Wednesday evening, but if you missed that, well, you're in luck because we're going to talk about it right now. Now, a lot of people think a monsoon is heavy rain. That's not what a monsoon is. A monsoon can cause heavy rain, but it's not the heavy rain itself. In fact, the simplest definition of a monsoon that I can give to you is it's a seasonal wind reversal. And that reversal of the wind that happens with the seasons causes a rainy season, but it also causes a dry season. So there actually are two elements to a monsoon that we don't actually get here in Colorado. So let's talk about it. And to talk about it, we're going to take you to India because it's in India where maybe the most perfect idea of a monsoon actually happens. And so this is what we're talking about, the summer monsoon. India just turns oppressively hot sometimes, and the temperatures will climb into the 90s and 100s throughout May and June. Now, heat likes to rise, and so when that heat starts to rise, air is going to rush in from the Indian Ocean to replace that rising air. Well, that air that comes in from the Indian Ocean is loaded with humidity. And that hot air still likes to rise, so it takes that humidity up with it, and it starts to generate showers and thunderstorms. The Himalaya mountains, they add to the lift. That air also rises up the southern slopes of the Himalayan mountains, and so this leads to the rainy season in the second half of the summer. And again, feet of rain can fall. This rain can be very heavy, and I think this is probably where most people get the idea that a monsoon is heavy rain, because again, it does cause heavy rain, even though it's not the actual heavy rain itself. Now, here's the half of the monsoon that we don't get, because we do get the rainy season here in Colorado sometimes. What we don't get is the dry season. In India, this cool air comes down from the Himalayan mountains, and cooler air likes to sink. Well, relatively warmer air is in place over the Indian Ocean itself, out over the water. And so as that air starts to rise, that cooler air gets drawn down from the Himalayan mountains and it dries the Indian subcontinent. And so there's not a whole lot of rain, and you can have, of course, months of dry air. Then those months may come with one or two rainy days, but it's nowhere nearly as rainy as the second half of the summer. So again, when you look at this and you kind of look at the whole definition of what a monsoon is, you come to realize that we actually do not have a monsoon in the western United States. Now, we call it a monsoon, and it's a monsoon because that's what we call it. But again, more appropriately, it's kind of a pseudo-monsoon. We get half of it, the wet half, but we don't get the dry half as a full monsoon would actually entail. So what's happening right now? This huge upper-level high-pressure system that's centered just south of us on Wednesday evening, it's not going to be moving much, and it hasn't moved much for really the better part of the last month or so. But you see the big low-pressure trough that's off the Pacific Northwest coast there? Usually that's a little farther south, and this high pressure is not quite so strong. The high pressure is strong, by the way, because of the developing El Niño down in the equatorial eastern Pacific. So what's happening here is that high pressure ridge is blocking the tropical moisture that's trying to surge north from the Pacific Ocean. And that's keeping us dry, and it's keeping our summer pseudo-monsoon, as we call it, really from actually developing. Now, this map is showing us moisture throughout the depth of the atmosphere. And what I want to point out here is these brighter colors, these almost greenish blues, and then especially the yellows and the oranges that are down over northwestern Mexico and over the Gulf of the Baja. Those are areas where the moisture content is much more rich. We see a lot of this over the central part of the country, and especially over the southeast as Gulf moisture from the Gulf of Mexico is flowing northward. So we're going to forecast this. We're going to move ahead in time here and show you that that moisture is quite abundant. Again, down over the Gulf of California. I called it the Gulf of the Baja a minute ago, but it's near the Baja Peninsula. That's where that came from. So northwest Mexico is kind of holding on to that moisture there because that high pressure ridge is just holding it to the south. And that's the case through Thursday and through Friday. Notice though, as we get into the weekend, that moisture starts to increase and lift a little farther north. It's trying to get up into Arizona, Southern California, and maybe far southern Nevada. And maybe even on Sunday and especially Monday, this can creep a little farther to the north. but that's about as far north as it gets. Through next Monday and Tuesday, you see little pockets of moisture over Utah in the brighter blues that are trying to get a little bit closer to us, but they just don't manage a whole lot. I show you this to say, there is no strong indication that the monsoon's going to kick in the next week to 10 days or so. There's a lot of moisture down here over the tropical eastern Pacific Ocean and just off the coast of central Mexico, and it's going to stay there for the most part through at least the middle of next week and probably even through next weekend. However, there is some indication that right around the end of the month, I'm talking the last maybe 4 to 7 days of July, and as we get into August, there is some indication that maybe, just maybe, some of that moisture starts to flow north and get up into the Four Corners region especially, and that should help us to get a drink of water here in western Colorado. And I know we're awfully thirsty, so we could use that water. So that's a little description of the monsoon and why it hasn't really kicked in yet, because typically it's kicking in by the end of June, and maybe an idea of when it could start kicking in. It's still a good 2 weeks away though, and a lot can change between now and then. But let's keep our fingers crossed and let's be optimistic.